So I've got some bad code to show people. It's my bad code, so I don't feel bad about showing it. Let me just present my desktop. So I've got this is as I mentioned at the fourth cafe at the beginning. Um, uh, I've converted P4 because I was doing a computer game, actually for an 8-bit micro, but I'm emulating it in P4, right? So there's a load of low layer structure, and there's a bunch of stuff in this file which is basically set up for the game, which is in the right side. And the problem is that I got to this today, and I thought, well, maybe I'll show the game, where it is, and it's halfway through. And I had some problems running it, and I figured out what the problem is. I think the problem is my code is rubbish. So if I load, this is loading P4 standalone with a bigger dictionary, and I'm just going to include, there's a startup file, and then I'm going to run it. So there's a run method that I can type. So I type run, and instantly I've actually compiled P4 is a C-based forth, but I've compiled it with the address sanitizer. Um, and there's this horrible crash dump which helps me in no way at all. So I was just going to say how I just there's a couple of minutes during the meeting that I sort of figured out what it was. So I'm just going to load P4 again, and then I'm gonna load the startup file. Now this I think it's crashing right early on, so I think it must be in this startup SDL function, which used to work. I obviously broken it just before when I was last working on it for some reason. So it's just above. So just as a what I tend to do, especially because it's so early, I'm going to run through it. So the cursor, I've got no idea what that does. I've forgotten. Initialize a loop variable of some sort. Platform open is a function that opens a bunch of the SDL stuff. So I'm going to open that. That seems to run okay. Then there is this initializes the graphics library and it returns a parameter which is checking. That looks okay. I think two, I seem to remember there's two means some good status.
Rob,
I don't know.
Rob,
Yeah.
image init is for initialize the loading and saving image, not
Yeah.
the SLD.
Ah, yes. So the STL must be in platform open, I think. It's probably
Okay,
up here
okay.
somewhere. And then this is loading the STL library or initializing the STL library. So I think there's some stuff. So I'm just trying to track why it's broken. So it seems to get okay because this all used to work, right? I was running for this for weeks. So now I'm going to load the graphics, which, all right, okay. So there's obviously something wrong with the graphics loading. So let me just run to that route, find that routine. So that routine is here. Now, we don't need to debug this on the phone. I won't put you through that, right? It was a few minutes, 10 minutes early on where I came through. But my point is this function has obviously overgrown its usefulness, this word, right? In terms of fourth words, this is sort of my worst nightmare. I wrote this code, I'd just like to point out. So it's my fault that it's rubbish. What don't I like about this? Well, image load texture is a SDL image. That's one of the standard media library functions, which takes the renderer and a file name. So the renders are okay. That's a render a word. And then it takes the file name. Now, what I've done is hacked this file name. This is a C function. So what I've done is I've taken a string and put a manual zero terminator on. Then I drop the length and pass it into here, which is okay. It's a bit ugly. And then there is this thing called graphic array. So the arrays in P4, P4's got an extension for arrays, and you pass in an offset to the graphic array. So this calculates the address of where you are in the array and you store it. Now, if it was a single line, I wouldn't have a problem. But the problem is I've got a lot of lines, and obviously these are all the graphics in the game. There is obviously somewhere in here buried, and I can't see. Now I could copy and paste each one of these lines in to the terminal, but that sounds like a really boring thing to do, right? So and it does do a check at the end to make sure all the graphics are loaded, but my problem, I think, is that this code has just become unwieldy and needs refactoring. And I think, I mean, this isn't. I wish I'd have thought of this problem, but Chuck Moore and others. In fact, I think where the word refactoring was first seen potentially in Starting Forth by Leo Brody, and I think he mentioned that the terminology is being used already. And obviously, refactoring has become a big word in software engineering generally. But this is a red flag, a coding red flag to me in Forth, and it's just become overwieldy, dealing with a whole bunch of stuff. And this library is a bit, once you get above the SDL library, it's actually very, very stable. But the SDL library doesn't like being passed in, random data for addresses. It doesn't take it very well. It tends to take the whole Forth down. So I did start to rewrite this. And this is my first pass. I was doing this while listening to some of the presentations. For a start, I don't like this zero terminator thing, right? This is just horrific to me because you have to, if I've missed one of these, that would go horribly wrong. So what I really want is just a standard string. And I also just want the offset to the graphic. I don't want any of this array rubbish in line. That's just insane. So these are just all constants, these offsets are. So this is my first attempt at refactoring, right? There's probably other things you can do. So I've moved all of this junk into a word called load graphic, underscore load graphic, which takes the file name, the length, and the graphic offset. And somebody in the chat was mentioning local variables in Forth. So I generally think that, I mean, you can avoid local variables, but you need to be quite careful about the parameter passing. The one thing that local variables gives you is the fact you can ignore parameter passing for a while while you're figuring out what other things are going on. So this is a function to convert. I want to convert it to a C string for a start. And I've just hacked up here. I've actually got a function so elsewhere which converts things to C strings. So I've just created a temporary store. This isn't great. I wouldn't say this is great coding, but it allows me just to forget about it for a minute. And then I've got a line that prints it out. C type actually prints a C string. It does a length and then a type. Nothing complicated. 2 words inside that definition. And then, so this basically, you can ignore that. We can comment that out. That's a debugging line. And then, so renderer, this is the name I temporarily store it in. Low graphic. Graphic offset is this offset in graphic array. And this version actually works. And what I found was, if I go to the original version, there's a typo here. There's an extra plus in the definition that was buried in this whole horrid array of junk. Now, it's true, I've space formatted this to make it look more like a table. But the thing, I didn't really want to go through, what's it called, but it was just, this is, I look at this and go, it doesn't work, but you can't see, it's just too complicated. Needs refactoring. So this was really that I wanted to share.
Just one thing.
Go ahead.
While you're in there, why don't you take those offset numbers and replace them by a variable that you increment? That way you can insert things in the middle without having to.
Yeah, you're right. I should do that. I should definitely do that as well. So this is the next thing that I think I'd do is this whole. See, what's happened is that I've started to add graphics into the game because it's originally a text-based game. And so I've hacked this stuff in while I've been concentrating on something else. And you're right, Adley. This is just another problem. What I really want is all the file names in some sort of outside of a word definition, maybe.
I make a mini CRUD out of those things. So I just have a function or a word that will add one. And I just give the name of whatever I want to add. And then all the housekeeping is in one place, all the rotten names.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So we should probably replace all of these low graphics with something else, right? maybe load monster graphics or something. I'll have to have a think about it, right? But it's just sort of a, I mean, I guess everybody does this, right? Maybe, but what's the well, whatever I was doing before I stopped on this particular project, obviously I was this function was the least of my worries. And then when I've come back to it, there's obviously been a bug that I just couldn't see, but things get overcomplicated too quickly. And I think, you know,
What was the error that you got? What was it? A
so I think now this is the problem, this plus. So I only spotted this when I started to refactor it. And it's the fact that we're adding monster graphics onto the return. So load texture returns an address of a texture. So we definitely shouldn't be adding this address onto that address. That's a bad idea. And then we're adding 17 onto that. And then we're trying to index into that array at a ginormous address. And then we're storing junk into it. So that plus is the bug in this function. But I think there's a bigger problem in my mind, right? I mean, I can remove the plus and it'll run again. I can, in fact, show you that probably. Let me just do that. So I know what the bug is in this function, but and I don't want to bash C programmers because I am one, but so if I move the window, right, this is the low resolution window because it's an 8-bit game, so it loads now, but a lot of other a lot of other programmers maybe in the C world, a lot of people I deal with would get to that bug and then stop. But I think the problem is bigger than that. It's the fact that the function just is, it's become unwieldy. The word has become unwieldy. And really we need to think about how to refactor it. So that, I thought that was mildly interesting. It was interesting for me anyway, because I came back to this code and went, who the hell, well, I know who wrote it because it was me, but you know, you dig yourself your own pit sometimes. You know, you end up in a deep hole and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah, we've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah.
What I
I
like to do whenever I have to loop over something and then do something inside the loop, I always find myself taking out whatever was in the loop and have it replaced by something generic so that I can reuse the loop.
I use sprite sheet. If all the graphics are the same
Yeah.
size, I make a one PNG with all the. I show you if you like.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of nice utilities that make sprite sheets. The sad thing, and I do need to do that, I just haven't got there yet. So I'd created a few sample graphics, but I haven't got around to making a sprite sheet up yet, and that would have probably helped actually a lot.
They are a web page. Piskel is very
Yeah,
good for making for drawing one-to-one these graphics and rearrange in one PNG. And I load this image indicating the size and split every sprite and drawing. I can show how to do. For example, this is one sprite sheet. Very tiny. Here. The tank, the explosion, and how work this. This is load the sprite sheet.
Yeah, so
You
you
see?
load the whole thing in one go, and then you just define, you set up indexes to parts
yes.
of that image. Yeah.
Es load. Load is in the this is the import of SDL library, and here.
But if you have the whole thing as one giant JPEG, how are you able to find the offset of the different sprite inside that big image?
Here, I pass the pixel width and pixelate and increment traversing all the size of the image, and put this box in an array, and go to the array. For example, here, this draw the sprite with a sprite sheet, a number of sprites, extract the tile for this array. The box is encoded in 64 number, and put in array for a very useful, very useful how is name? Render geometry, SDL render geometry. With this only function in SDL, you make almost all. This function take an description, and you can get a part of the image and put in the screen.
So you're actually working with a bitmap, not with a JPEG directly.
It's convenient have the image in a texture, SDL texture, because it's a hardware accelerated. All is hardware accelerated. I can draw 100 of image and no performance loss. And this is, if you don't graphic with SDL, I recommend see how this work. And you can make rotating sprite and make scaled sprite until a sheet almost free for your program. Is very fast and very useful. For example, here I can rotate and how the image are indexed by a number. I can make animation, frame to frame animation. Simply change this number. I don't. This is those all work for support extensions to SDL library. For example, this is spreadsheet load. This is draw the sprite with rotation, draw a sprite with scale and rotation, and the difference is how fill the vertex for rendering for this work. It's only, for example, I use a list of vertex. For vertex is a box, and size index, but because need triangles internally. And then, for example, this is hotel. Well, many games. I try to remember who are last. But the big game is this word, and the code for Load and something, they are very similar, as you proving, Rob. I now have the problem of a string with zero termination because my system has zero termination by default.
Ah, okay.
And
Yeah,
I don't have, see, and I don't have a floating point, and then but the function not require floating point for parameter, but require floating point for memory chunk, and only greeting in memory a floating point representation of the fixed point, and then go. This is the fixed point operation, and this make a floating point memory of a fixed point number. With this, I can send info to the graphic cards and make these graphics. Perhaps you no need, because GeForce have a floating point.
It would be easy in Forth. It would be easy to make wrappers around those SDL library functions.
Yeah, you're right. I just haven't got around to it yet.
Have you looked at the part that externals? I think it's called externals or something like that. It's where you create those wrappers. It's really easy.
Yeah, so actually the P4 SDL uses somebody else's work where they put G4, they included SDL into G4. So effectively the P4 build loads a Forth file that automates wrappers from the C. So the guy who did the G4 port, who loaded the G4, converted the headers into Forth files, and then that automates part of the wrapper process. So all the SDL, but they're slightly fragile in the case, because if they don't like passing, if you pass a bad pointer in. So a lot of these low level functions, I think they're a bit, once you get past this layer, usually you stop having crashes, because you're not past, there's not so many pointers involved. There's a lot of pointers involved or addresses involved in a lot of the SDL calls, and if you get the wrong order, then the runtime doesn't like it.
You could have like a dispatch function that would check the parameters before passing them on, and you could use that for the development version, and then afterwards it's just.
So this was my conversation with with Peter Chekaki on the Forth list in January, maybe early January, about whether we could have a system of boxed and unboxed types. So all these SDL functions that are a bit fragile, would instead, there'll be a wrapper around it where they had like a box type where you could double check it was the right type. I've been meaning to play with it. I don't think it'd be many lines of Forth code to do that. You could add onto any Forth system, but I haven't got around to doing that either. It's on my long list of things that I haven't got around to yet, which is bigger than my list of things that I've got around to.
Well, a couple of asserts and defines, and you're done, right?
Okay, so I don't know whether Ulrich has disappeared. Maybe it's getting towards dinner time in Europe.
Yeah, I think
Posted
I'm
a
gonna leave it here
yeah,
too.
And
it
lunch
posted a
in the
picture of
US.
and lunch in the US. Yes, everybody must be hungry. So I know Ulrich had posted a picture of a dial, an ESP32 S3, which you say that's the ARM part dial, one of the M5 stack devices. I'm sure you've all seen this device here.
Sorry, have you seen Leo? Like 5'10", blue eyes, definitely dropped on his head. It's optics. Right now, this prison
That dial looks pretty cute. Oh, what's that?
Yeah.
Out of stock. How dare they?
I know. So, yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of stuff in this. A lot of the M5 dial stuff, they appear to be producing quite interesting parts.
No kidding. An intelligent dial, which means you can program all kinds of mischief into it. I like it already.
So